Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Unfortunately, I got very sick a few days ago, so I'm sorry if I talk lots of nonsense, but I'll do my best. So do excuse me. But I'm very happy to be here and share with you some thoughts from my world, which is also our world. I'm a conductor, a musician, in fact. And I would like to share with you some of the impressions and processes and dilemmas involving our profession and how these are incredibly relevant to you, our public, and how much you are relevant to us, and how much all of this is relevant and extremely reflecting of the state of our society. I got to music very early, when I was very, very young, and like many kids, I played an instrument. I started with the cello when I was about 4, and one day when I was about 7 years old, I happened to come across a recording of the Seventh Symphony of Gustav Mahler, which ended up, in a way, changing my life. I was incredibly overwhelmed by this music, and it somehow became clear to me that that is the reason for me to be here, and that is the mission I would like to fulfill with my life. And subsequent to that, it became also my profession. For me, music is a mission, not a job. I believe that we are all here for a reason. We all have a calling. Some of us discover it earlier than others. Some of us know it or feel it better. Some of us are more aware of it than others. Some of us even spend their entire lives denying and rejecting their real vocation, but ultimately this reason is there. I was very lucky to have discovered very early on which channel it is through which I'm supposed to serve humanity in our society. It might all sound very spiritual or somehow quasi-religious, but it's absolutely not meant that way, at least not necessarily. Whether one's calling is a heaven-given message or a psychological illusion that each one and every one of us tells ourselves, it's entirely beside the point. Its ultimate presence is, to my view, indisputable. It's always been clear to me, or at least for as long as I can remember, that I have a mission at hand, and a mission I was ordered to fulfill, and I'm here to pursue. Just as much as a priest is dedicated to his God and his religion, a musician is in service of his art. He is selfless, and he is entirely devoted to a cause greater than himself. A composer does not create music. Music writes itself through him. An interpreter, whether a conductor, an instrumentalist, or a singer, is similar. Music chooses you as its servant, and you must submit yourself to its powers. I personally do not believe in talent. We must be careful and avoid the typical sort of Hollywood fantasy, which helps creating stars and miracles and all sorts of other wonders. The talent, the wunderkind, the genius, those are very, very dangerous and, to my opinion, entirely empty terms. For me, success and excellence are about discipline and sensitivity, hard work and the ability to listen, perseverance and the eternal possession of conviction, but primarily it is about sincerity and integrity. I strongly believe every person can reach their goals in life, however ambitious or seemingly unattainable they are, by perseverance and with a clear goal. The only condition is sincerity and integrity. If we are honest, we shall prevail. Music happens in the moment it is performed. Tragically or magically, depending on how one wants to look at it, it never really happens. For the moment when it happens is already the moment after it's gone. Music is, after all, a memory of an event past. And this memory forms in the spirit of each one of the listeners. On this process, we musicians have absolutely no control. A musical experience is not only the perception of what the musicians create for you on stage. It is the combination of two equally essential, equally fragile, and entirely dependent elements. The message given by the musician, that which we are there to transmit, and the receptor, and the baggage the listener brings with him to the musical experience, to the concert situation. A piece of art is ultimately a microcosm of life, a concentrated, condensed message which depicts the exact same things that which happen in our lives, which the processes we are dependent on, which we live, just in miniature form. We want to express what we are, our thoughts, our fears, our worries, our hopes, some which we don't even dare to express verbally, but also what we would want to be. It is a form of escapism in a sense, a form of fantasy, but also more than that, it is a way to form our future. An orchestra too, like a piece of music, is a microcosm of society. And just as much as our modern society is in trouble, the world of music is in huge trouble. This is time for us musicians to realize one thing very clearly. We have a problem. The average age of our audience is over 60, and the percentage of the population which consumes classical music is, in some Western countries, in a good day, less than 2%. What is the future supposed to look like? What happens when this incredibly important and dear audience of elderly people pass away? Those who did not manage to pass this tradition to the next generation. What happens then? Who is supposed to come to our concerts in 20, 30, 40 years if it continues looking the way it does now? Leading an orchestra is an incredibly sensitive task, embodying a monumental responsibility. You are there to manage people, but you are also extremely responsible for their fate and for their destiny. You have a huge responsibility, but they rely on you, but at the same time you cannot do without them. The conductor is a filter. He is an element which focuses all rays of inspiration. He is a channel through which the energies of all the musicians of the orchestra flow to create a message which unites them all, but is still, and that is very important, the individual message of each and every single one of them. The outdated picture of the conductor as a dictator, as some sort of an unreachable element who ruthlessly imposes his authority on his subordinates, on those unimportant little musicians, is absurd and fundamentally sick. Through fear, no real art can be created. Only through common creativity there can be real inspiration. Only through sincere and honest sharing there can be excellence. A conductor's task is not to tell people what to do, is to make them want to do it by themselves. In a sense, you are there to involve your musicians, you're in there to share with them an experience, share with them a vision, and make them reach the point where they wish to pursue it by themselves. The only way to have people dedicate for themselves is also give them a certain responsibility, but a direct and fair share in the result of their fate, and that also is the result of the performance. As you can imagine, I am quite young for a person of this profession, and I've faced numerous comments on that matter all my life. It's almost a curse once one can't hear that anymore. And imagine the very odd and awkward situation. I started by sheer coincidence very, very early. I knew very early that this is the direction I would like to dedicate myself to. And by sheer coincidence, as I said, I ended up finding myself in front of a big orchestra in a very early age, being at least 30, 40, 50 years younger than most of the people I was supposed to conduct. And well, it might sound funny, but it is very, very uncomfortable. And it would be hard to describe in words what it feels like to stand at the age of 16 in front of an orchestra of 50-year-old Germans who have all done it before, have all done it better, who all know what's the right way, and think, oh shit, I have to get my salary, so I kind of have to sit here, but what this guy is all about. And to somehow become completely schizophrenic and say, okay, I don't know that, I'm not thinking about all that, I'm just going to do my thing because I believe in what it is that I'm trying to do, because it's not about me, it's about the music. Well, that's not easy. I personally entirely disagree or dismiss the concept of age and the dependency we all seem to feel about this subject. What is age? Age is an entirely irrelevant and theoretical figure which tells us how many days has a person spent on the planet. It does not tell us what he has done with his time. It does not tell us what he has lived, what he has understood, what he has not lived, and what he has not understood. But a figure of a number of days. Well, I have experienced in my life musicians and artists of 10 years old who have seemed to have lived in their very short life more than many others at the age of 50. So is it really fair to I would say to have a prejudice, whether positive or negative? It is equally, I think it's equally absurd against or in favor of people because of their age. What is interpretation? Every musician, every performer who conducts an orchestra, plays a violin, sings, is an interpreter. He's there to bring an image to life, Musicians' lives are about imagining music, developing slowly and painfully a concept of a piece, like an embryo through its pregnancy. We are ultimately there to realize our conception of these pieces and transmit them to our audience. This process, which is hard to describe and can only be understood when it's lived, is unique and very, very difficult. A piece of music is not created as such by the composer, at least not in the way we all seem to want to think about it. A composer in a typically romantic image sitting in his attic, in a dusty little attic with a little bit of light and sort of struggling against himself until finally inspiration comes, possesses him, and great piece. Well, okay, that's nice, but has very little to do with music and with music making. A piece of music comprises of two equally essential and equally crucial phases: composition and performance. There is an incredibly complex dependency between the two. Ultimately, both performer and composer must accept that they alone cannot create a piece of music. For there is no music without its performance, just as much as there is no performance of a piece of music without a written score. The composer's role in the process of creation is in fact complete by the moment he has put the last drop of ink on his manuscript. The first phase in the piece's pregnancy is then complete, but just as much as a fertile male is not enough to produce an embryo, so is a score still very far from a born child. Music finds you, music catches you, music possesses you and creates itself through you. Your task is to be free to bring your state of mind to the point in which this can happen. But the actual process of music making is not about control, it is not about activity, it is about complete confidence and trust in your inspiration and letting your ego and control mechanism go. And let this art of the moment create itself through you. Music doesn't have a manual. It's not like a washing machine one can buy where it says on a little book which buttons you have to push for it to function in a certain way. It's an eternal search full of doubts, full of uncertainties, full of unclarities, very vague one. And the only clarity, the one sole clarity, is that there will never be an answer. It is only an endless doubt, in a sense. The problems of musicians nowadays is that they receive far too many answers. Their surroundings and because of their education and professional situations, early, late, all throughout their lives, they get answers. They get to do that, not to do this, so you should be like that, not be like that, from every single direction. But one thing which is so important, which they seem to miss and never get, is questions. We're never taught how to ask questions. This is all the problem of society, I believe. We have forgotten how to doubt. The struggle of a musician in modern society is a mirror to society in itself and its many problems. Everything is fast. Everything is accessible, extremely accessible. There's no time to learn, to absorb, to live our experiences, digest them, and finally come up with a step forward. Everything has to be fast and effective. 100 years ago, when one would want to go from Vienna to Paris, one would take a train for 20 hours or so, or maybe even more. It would be exhausting, unpleasant, and one would finally, at some point, reach your destination in a state where you could appreciate that, you could really understand what it means to have arrived in a new culture, in a new language, in a new tradition. Nowadays, we can fly 15 million times a day, we can go from city to city to city, we can be everywhere anytime, with Skype and phone and God knows what, we can be everywhere. Everything is so fast that we have forgotten how to realize that we actually exist. The only thing we know is that we can now be in Paris, but actually we see a person on the computer who is in Seattle, but at the same time tomorrow we will be in the other side of the world with the same person in Australia. So we have lost any form of ability to appreciate transition between time and between places. On the same note, it's about information, very similar to that. If one had to go to a library to read a book many, many years ago, if one had to look in an encyclopedia to know something about something nowadays, people think they've read a book once they've read the synopsis on Wikipedia. They read 3 lines and they, oh yeah, I read that. I don't need to read 3,000 pages of Tolstoy. I know what the story is all about. So who cares? I mean, what do I need to read pages and pages of Proustian descriptions of situations? I want to know what the plot's about. So the plot's on Wikipedia, so I'm done. In that kind of conditions, how can one really appreciate art, and how can one remember why is art even necessary? I'll never forget an experience which I've had a few months ago. Actually, this is all very real experience. I was in a festival, and I met a guy who plays the violin who always had a hat on. He was to go everywhere with his hat. On concert, on stage, in rehearsals. I was asking myself whether he goes to bed with his hat too, but I've never got an answer to that. And I asked him one day, tell me, what's this whole hat thing about? And he told me, you know, my hat is my UPS. And I looked at him with very big eyes, and to me this sounded like Chinese, and I said, uh-huh. And he told me, it's my unique personal style. I was like, aha. And what's that about? And he said, well, you know, if I go to a concert and people listen to me, they say, oh, that's the guy with the hat. Uh-huh. Well, he said, don't you have your UPS? I was like, no. Well, you will never make it. So why should we talk about somebody's great concert or the incredible performance he has given? No. That's the guy with the hat. Yeah? So we lost any possibility to distinguish ourselves through content. Now it's about hats. Yeah? On a similar note, I experienced a few weeks ago a lady who won a very important award in Germany for her performance, who walked on stage with a skirt which was about till here, shoes about that high, makeup which would really do injustice to a prostitute, and she got a prize for an incredible performance. I wonder as what? Well, anyhow, this form of meat market, which one cannot really reproach her for. I mean, the poor girl is actually nothing but a victim of society. She surrenders to extreme pressure, because if you want to distinguish yourself and stand out, you have to be different, either with a hat or with something else. Sadly, most of these people will end up only distinguishing themselves through that. There is a great contrast between substance and sellability these days, a struggle every musician has to go through, concentrating and dedicating himself to content on one hand, but still managing to survive and be of interest to the market, well, in many different ways. This contrast between the inner world of inspiration and the outer world of commercialism is absurd, and one cannot expect real content to come out in that way, and it's more cruel than it has ever been before. Before coming here, I was asked by the organization of the symposium to answer several questions by email and relate to a recent failure or success that I've experienced. And I was at first very surprised by that question. I thought, oh, what's that about? And then in fact, I realized that I shouldn't be surprised at all. It all makes very much sense. We are forced to contemplate on such terms as success as failure as a form of communication. I really believe that our world is far too competitive and far too judgmental. Words such as success and failure are exact symbols of that. We live in an extremely materialistic world where anybody who wants to distinguish themselves have to excel in some sort of a way which one can count or measure. One has to rise to a certain degree beyond everybody else. Is that all about concurrence? Because if you are not the best, then you're of course not of interest, because everything is judgmental, so either better or worse. And all achievements are measured through countable results, so more or less. One of the biggest disasters which happened to classical music, for example, in the past 40, 50, 60 years, it was the invention of the CD. We're all forced to make recordings nowadays. 100 years ago, if you wanted to listen to a piece of music, you would have to wait 5 years until your local orchestra or opera house would come along and play the certain Beethoven symphony you wanted to listen to. Otherwise, you could play it on the piano, play it for yourself, listen to it in your head, or travel 1,000 kilometers to hear it. Otherwise, tough luck. Nowadays, iPhone out, button on, you can relive that symphony of Beethoven millions of times a day. Well, or not. Does really a universe of a piece of music come to life through an iPhone? That is a point I haven't really found a solution for. But a life experience, a live performance is about content, and it's about sincerity. It used to be about giving a message which is human. And through that, it's inevitably imperfect, because humans are not perfect. Nowadays, if you want to listen to a CD, or if you want to record a CD, everybody expects it to be perfect. People want to consume the artist as a perfect, unreachable master who can play everything perfectly, but oh God, no, don't be sincere. We don't really care about what you really feel. You have to be entertaining. This illusion of perfection is destroyed a concert experience altogether, because what do we try to do as musicians? We think, okay, that's what people like, so we're going to go and try to play very perfect art. We're definitely not going to take any risks, and we're definitely not going to say anything, but we're going to be as perfect as possible. Everybody's going to be happy, go home, and come back. Sincerity is vulnerable, it is fragile, it is human, and therefore it is both beautiful and ugly, it's both successful and unsuccessful, it's positive and negative, but our public wants to hear only a perfect rendition, which is only beautiful, only positive, and only successful. Well, that's not life. In the same way, you can compare this experience of beauty and performance to the beauty of a woman, for example. I mean, I can speak about that. Nowadays, you look at a magazine, you see a photo of something, usually manipulated with some sort of computer or another, that's supposed to be beautiful. Oh well. I've, in my life, never seen a photo which I found beautiful. I mean, for me, you can tell the beauty of a woman through looking at her eyes, to see if there's some sort of a purity that radiates through her expression. But no, it's all about what distance there is between the nose and the eyes and I don't know what other kind of body parts which are measurable in one way or another. So that's what music has become. If he plays all the notes in the right order, in the right way, well, that's beautiful. Great. Well, I'm not going to marry a woman like that, that's for sure. Many years ago, there were millions of people flooding the squares of Vienna running to hear the next Beethoven symphony, the one he just finished. Nowadays, orchestras are being shut down by quasi-fascist policies which opposed to culture, and most of the public will never set a foot in a concert hall. But that is a problem, and we cannot ignore this problem anymore. In a sense, what happened was that 100 years ago, there was a split. That was when modern went in one direction and popular became in another direction. That's where the problem started. Composers started writing music for other musicians, which one has to understand. It doesn't have to be good, you don't have to experience it or feel anything, you have to understand. Yeah. So the moment that tonality finished, or tonality was killed, people started writing noise and said, if you don't understand it, it means you're stupid. But we are good. So go have your popular stuff, it's only 3 minutes long, you have boom and boom and boom, and that's fine, that's good for your level. Well, that's stupid. Because if the public does not like what it's listening to, you cannot go on for 100 years, which is what we have been doing, and say, well, the public is stupid. Because what happens is that you have only got 2% of it left to listen. So, yeah, good luck. What's happening nowadays, people say to young people of my generation, they come out of a concert, and they say, well, I'm not really sure, I didn't really understand it. So it must have been great, but I'm not really sure. Well, no, it's not great. It's boring. Most of what classical musicians play nowadays is boring. I am a musician myself. I don't go to concerts. Because what I hear is not worth either the money or the time. It's routine. It's recycled. It's boring. And what do people say? Oh, they say, oh, the youth. What do they know? They're ignorant. Huh? But the youth doesn't lie. It doesn't clap at the end of a concert because they paid 100 euros to show the new dress, and it doesn't come back because, oh my God, I must go and see Mrs. So-and-so and Mrs. So-and-so, who will come and show their beautiful clothes next time, who will also paid exactly that much money to be looked at. If they don't like it, they say it's shit. And it is shit. And we have two options. Either we're going to keep on pretending we don't hear that until 50 years from now we'll say, oh, well, we have no audience anymore, and oh, well, we have no orchestras anymore, but, well, we always stuck to the truth, or we're going to start listening to what our public is telling us. Well, there are two options. Either classical music is going to be left out to die, like many movements in the past did, or we're going to give it a second chance and try and repair all the damage that our colleagues over the past 100 years have done by ignoring everybody saying, well, they don't understand. Art should push society. Art should inspire society. Art should bring society forward. And the moment it is society that pushes art. Financing culture generally is basically like feeding a baby. Nobody's going to ask itself, am I supposed to feed my baby or not? Well, you kind of have to. Otherwise it dies. And if we don't feed culture, it will die, and so with it will our society. Because, in a sense, culture is our future, because our tradition and our history is our identity. Gustav Mahler, who means very much to me, said, there's a very famous quote, he said, tradition is about maintaining the fire, not worshipping the ashes. What have we done? We've said, oh, well, they've been doing that all that way for so long, so let's continue doing that. So what does that mean? We're going to have concerts the same way that they've had them 200 years ago. Well, why? Nobody knows. So, we're going to pay a lot of money, we're going to dress up, we're going to go, we're going to not enjoy it, but we're going to say we did because it's haute société to say that it's good. We're going to first look at the critique in the next day in the paper and see what the critic said. If he said it's good, it must have been because we're stupid. And if we didn't feel anything, we're going to still ignore that because we must be stupid. So, and that's what they did for a very long time. And that's where we are. So I very much would like to leave you all with one message. If you go to a classical music concert and don't enjoy it, it's our fault. The state of classical music nowadays, the way it looks, is our fault. What nobody dares to say, because all musicians are very good in blaming everybody else, is that we cooked our soup. And that's where we found ourselves. The sad thing is that it's relevant for every single other aspect of society. Classical music is only one very small, but very, very symbolic part of where we are standing nowadays. The problem of our society, just as much as of classical music, is, to my opinion, very simple. We have forgotten the real meaning of freedom and the real meaning of sincerity. In music as well as in society, we are taught to think in patterns, to think in templates. We are not encouraged to find our own ways. We should stop being given answers, but we should start looking for the questions. We should be forced to deal with our own doubts and find our very own way. We should be helped to listen to the very inner voice of who we are and what it is that we are trying to say. We should help the others to go for it, as they say, to go for what they really are, to be themselves. We must help them to find the courage which has been gone for so long, the courage to be who they are, to feel what they feel, and not be ashamed of it. The courage to be sincere. Because it is only through integrity that we can live the true calling of our spirit, and it is only through integrity that we can live the true calling of society. Thank you very much.